Oh, do you wanna start with announcements?
May as well.
Yeah.
So if any commissioner has something they'd like to share with the broader community, I see Commissioner Ray has raised his hand quickly.
I did want to at least point out that the steering committee for the Park Morton redevelopment had a meeting recently, and they did notice us that some geotechnical borings will be taken in the coming months to decide what kind of foundation footings and things like that. So it'll be limited to that kind of boring, but it will require them to bring some fairly large equipment onto the property and to do that. And I guess I should also report that we had a resignation from one of the co-chairs. And so based on a vote, I was named as one of the two co-chairs with Ms. High as the other. So that's my report.
And don't fail to mention that the meetings, I believe, are quarterly right now.
Yes.
Yeah, as we're waiting for the court case to get a decision.
Kent, this is Rashida.
Yes.
I'm also in the Park Morton Steering Committee meeting, and the DC Housing Authority has been providing a lot of updates, particularly on residents who have received a voucher and where they have chosen to locate across various parts of the city. And they have data by ward, and we can share that information out to the community as well.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Brown, for that. I was actually encouraged when I saw that map. It is publicly available, but it's a little hard to navigate. So if you could make it simpler for people, that would be great. I was encouraged that it looked like the majority of our neighbors at Park Morton who have relocated, when you look at families by ward, the highest number were still in Ward 1, followed by Ward 3. So that was encouraging to see that so many had been able to find housing so nearby. Are there any other announcements from commissioners? Not. Cynthia, did you have anything to share? If so, let us know in the chat. We could elevate you to a panelist.
Kent, while we're waiting on that, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine.
To remind people about the curfew that's happening today, the mayor released a statement, and I believe the curfew takes place at 11 p.m. So just like for all residents, please, those who are just kind of out and about or those who are protesting, just be safe, and also take note of any changes that's happening with this curfew. And right now, today is going to be at 11 p.m.
Yep. Thank you, Commissioner. Let's see. Okay. So Cynthia Trucios doesn't have anything to share at this meeting, but she will be sharing out at our meeting next week. Thank you for that. So I will say if there's anyone else attending this call that has something to share, if you could raise your hand to let us know or put something in the chat to let us know, that would be helpful. While we're waiting to see if anyone does, Commissioner Rabarczyk, would you like to take roll call?
Of course. Commissioner Bonneau?
Present.
Commissioner Edmondson? Not present. Commissioner Rybarczyk? Present. Commissioner Goldschmidt? Not present. Commissioner Miller?
Present.
Present. Commissioner Castagnon? Not present. Commissioner Bundy?
Here.
Commissioner Bass?
Here.
Commissioner Ray?
Here.
Commissioner Brown?
Present.
Commissioner Love Wade?
Present.
And Commissioner Clock?
Present.
We have quorum.
Thank you. Okay, it doesn't look like anyone has indicated that they have something to share, so we can move on to approval of the agenda, which, as I have it and has been shared on our website, it's ANC 1A letters and or testimony regarding the district's FY21 budget, with bullets being education and transportation. I believe the first one of those would be introduced by Commissioner Miller. Would you like to take yourself off mute and let us know, walk us through it?
Well, thank you everybody for agreeing to this special meeting. At the time, we definitely we were not clear on how the budget meetings and timeline was going to work, and whether or not we would be having our monthly meeting. So I appreciate everyone taking another night to spend with everybody to help get these passed. This letter, I did not receive any additional changes, so I'll just walk through what I submitted and shared earlier this week. This is a letter requesting additional funding for the out-of-school time programs. I can tell you in this year's budget, the grant portion or the grant-making portion of the funding has been left unharmed. I've been working with a coalition of out-of-school time providers, and they are pushing to have the funding remain stable. I am asking for more. I think with COVID and the needs of our students, not just through the social and emotional challenges that they're dealing with, the trauma, etc., the isolation. We also really are going to face a very difficult challenge in our schools with learning loss, both from the summer, but also through the challenges of having our schools shut down for 2 months. So this sort of sets the priority and recognizes that we will have a need for greater support outside of our schools, and our out-of-school time program providers have been doing just amazing work to get that to the populations it's most needed, and really providing that one-on-one attention that students aren't always able to get in school. So this, the roles of out-of-school time programming, we know that it improves academic outcomes. We know that it improves attendance, but we also recognize that the relationships that are built through the adults and mentors with students help with a lot of harms and improves a lot of confidence and skills. And we also know that these programs reduce instances of violent crimes and offer a lot of other preventions through reductions in teen pregnancies, risky behavior, drug, alcohol use exposure. And the final part of this letter, and it's looped in and linked with out-of-school time programming. It is this after-school period when our students are sort of in a space where they need adult attention. Those hours between 2 to 6, these peak times for that can be challenging for young people. We've also asking for attention to our DPR roving leaders. We currently have, I believe, 2 Commissioner Bass, if you could clarify, make sure I'm saying that right. I know you've been in conversation with Director Horton.
Hunter,
sorry.
We may have a total of 4 roving leaders. I know there are 2 at Parkview, and I'm sure there's 1, maybe 2 at the Columbia Heights Community Center, I believe. Okay. If you don't mind me interjecting a little bit,
please.
Here, the roving leaders I know over in my area are very, very instrumental. The reason they're referred to as roving leaders is because they're DPR employees that aren't tied to staying on the DPR property. They rove off into the community and they make connections and they make sure that youth and young adults are engaged in activities that aren't, like, shall we say, that have better outcomes. So I think roving leaders in many ways are probably prototypes for what many people think of as violence interrupters. And so they're another key piece of this. And while we recognize that the Commissioner Ray pointed out that there is a decrease in the roving leader budget this year, but in reaching out to Director Hunter, he made it clear that there's no reduction in service, headcount, or programming with regards to the roving leaders this year, that it was a technical adjustment. So considering the difficult decisions that need to be made in the budget, we're okay with that reduction because there's no reduction in service. But we do think that when the district is back on its feet in a couple of years, that there should be additional investment into the roving leaders, because since they're not, it's okay for them to be based in places like Columbia Heights Community Center, but we really would like to see them roving further still to Powell Park or the Columbia Heights Civic Plaza or the park at 14th and Girard, which these are unstaffed DPR facilities, which oftentimes have their own challenges for various reasons based on the location. And we certainly think that at least I would like to see more, like when youth have interactions with adults, I would rather have their first interaction be with a roving leader than that first interaction being with a police officer, because no one else was there for them to engage with. So I think that there's a huge opportunity there to have healthier outcomes and healthier programming and just a stronger community. And with that, I'll turn it back over. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hijack your introduction, Commissioner Miller.
No, I really appreciate that. I think we don't give enough attention to the roles of our roving leaders. And I'll just add one little thing, because you've summed it up so well. They have, the schools have relationships with these roving leaders, and they do use them. They tap them to help with students that they're having issues with truancy or issues outside of the school. So these program providers, the schools, and the roving leaders, they're all very connected. And so I think, and especially as we're looking at conversations with violence interruption, I think one that really is in our schools and knows our students, highlighting them and of course encouraging funding towards that effort helps everybody.
All right. So with that, are there any questions or comments or discussion?
Commissioner, I have one comment about the out of school time programs. Thank you, Commissioner Miller, for all of your leadership on this. And I'm glad that you raised the issue around having enough support in our budget for out of school time programs. I think that, coming out of this, we could say anecdotally that we're going to experience a hit because with COVID-19, we don't know, right? But we do know is that, this program really provides a meaningful solution to support youth during this time. And we can experience a hit. I think that in many parts of our system across district government, we will experience a significant increase across a number of our programs and systems who are, who have, residents who are reaching out for services and support, and out of school time programs can really play a critical role in our communities. So thank you for that. And I just want to mention that on the out of school time programming.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. I really appreciate that you added the linkage between our out of school time providers and the supports, because for many of our students and for many of our families, they are that connection. And I can, I've worked with enough of these program providers, and I have my own children in these out of school time programs, and the relationships that they have with the students and the families are different than you can get in the school. just by the nature of the way that they're set up. And the moment the schools shut down, I have really appreciated seeing our out of school time providers pivot almost faster and more and giving more attention to students than our schools were able to do, just again by the nature of their size and the relationships that they have built up and the networks as well. And so yeah, I think everything you just said hits the nail on the head. We are going to have more demand for their services and more need. And so leaving the funding as is certainly better than what we had feared, but I don't think it's enough. It wasn't enough before. We're still looking at 40,000 seats, almost empty for our at-risk students. And so we definitely have a gap already, and even more glaring with COVID and the increased demand.
Agreed. Any further discussion? Commissioner Rybarczyk?
Commissioner Miller, I saw in our inboxes a week or two ago, we received something from DC Auditor about OST oversight. And I was wondering if you wanted to address any of that in this letter, or if that's something for like a totally separate conversation.
I didn't see that.
Okay.
What
Then.
the auditor, was it the report that they did?
Yeah.
Oh, I just blanked. Will Perkins did mention that. Yes. So no, I didn't. That was the first I'd seen of that report, and I haven't had a chance. But I can go through it and see if there's anything pertinent and add it into the letter. I think there are some data points that I could definitely include, and that I would like to include in this letter, this testimony, and I can look through that to see if there's anything relevant as well.
Sure. Yeah, I just want to flag. Okay. Thank you.
No, thank you for the reminder. I know he had mentioned that. I don't even remember what day of the week that was.
I
Saturday.
can just email you the link for later. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. If there's no further conversation or comments, I'm open to a motion.
Anybody?
Oh.
So I move to accept this as testimony to submit to the Committee for Public Safety, the Committee on Workforce Development, and of course the Committee on Education, as well as including the directors and appropriate representatives for each agency in the office.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Let's try this a different way rather than doing roll call, since I can see everybody in the windows, with the exception of Dottie. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Hand raised.
There you go. That works. Oh,
And
Commissioner
Commissioner
Bundy, I
Bundy.
can't see yours either.
Hold on. I gotta.
Or you can just say hand raise.
Yeah, you could just say hand raised. All right. It looks like the ayes have it. Congratulations, Commissioner Miller, and we will move on to Commissioner Rybarczyk for transportation.
Sorry, I'm just recording the vote. 1 second. Great. So I know yesterday, during our committee of the whole, we discussed this. I still need to pull our notes from transportation committee into a formal letter, but we did go through the budget. We did go through the capital project as well. Something I wanted to flag, for everyone's awareness is that, there are cuts to the Office of the Director, the Office of Transportation Equity and Inclusion Division, and the Performance Administration, which includes Community Engagement and Customer Service Divisions. So I'd like to note that as something that we hope it doesn't hinder the mission of DDOT to enhance the quality of life for district residents and visitors. And also,
Excuse me, was that a position in each of those agencies or multiple?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, when you said the budget was cut, I'm assuming that it impacts manpower. And so would that be positions lost in each agency or at least one position per
Not
agency?
FTEs are not supposed to be affected. So I assume this relates to other, I don't know where the dollars come from. But it does not,
Okay.
it's not supposed to equate to employees cut. I do want us to make the ask to have DDOT provide an additional full-time employee to serve as a dedicated community engagement specialist for Ward 1, because as we said before, right now we share engagement specialist, Kenny, with Wards 1 and 2, and to put us on equal footing with the other wards, I'd really like us to have one dedicated specialist. So that's a pretty basic ask. And then I went through a few of the key performance indicators that DDOT has to meet. A lot of them have to do with safety, increasing the percentage of on-time buses, especially related to the circulator. Something I wanted to flag was the increasing the number of livability studies that are completed and implemented. I know that's something that we've discussed needing at the Hebrew Home development. They're proposing doubling the number of those livability studies. So I would say we'd want to call that out as being in support. And I'm not sure, I know Commissioner Goldschmidt's not here, but if Commissioner Bonneau had anything to say. Something I did want to flag for Commissioner Miller is they want to increase the number of Kids Ride Free passes that are picked up. I would say we also strongly want to support that, but also increase the number of distribution sites to meet families where they are, if and when in school or in-person school returns. I'm sure that will be a heavy lift when the school year restarts next year. And then supporting a number of their proposed capital projects includes the implementation of 16th Street Bus, improving a lot related to improving ADA compliance and accessibility of sidewalks and bus stops. They proposed an overhaul of the TOP system. If we'd ever had to apply something through there, it's a outdated and sort of messy system. So they have some funds dedicated to overhauling that, and a lot related to street maintenance of green infrastructure and streetscapes. And that's something I know we've wanted for Georgia Avenue for a long time that has been already planned out and has never been put into practice. So I'd say we also want to strongly support funds going to Georgia Avenue for that. So it's a long list, but I do want to put it into a letter format and submit that as written testimony to the Committee on Transportation and Environment, and copy our council member and director of DDOT as well.
I support that.
Yeah, I think it's great, Zach. It looks, if your testimony is in more letter form for everything that you've bulleted, I think it's fantastic. The one other thing I would offer, and not to include in your letter or something that needs to be done now, but I think maybe when it's submitted and if you when it's sent to Director Meridian, I would still very much maybe use this as a vehicle to ask him if he's open to having a meeting with us to sit down and talk through these priorities and other ongoing projects that really aren't related to the budget, but have been on the books for a while. I think that I'm pretty sure, based on the conversations with commissioners, that there's a strong desire for us to have a better relationship with DDOT. I hope DDOT feels the same way. And if we're all willing to just have a conversation about this, I think we can make some progress.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm happy to follow up, and I think this is like a good entrance into that conversation. So
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think that there's some projects under the Crosstown study and recommendations that were included, and we've engaged the community, I mean, years ago. And, you know, we recognize that some of the projects were more short-term and others were more long-term and needed to be built in the budget with timelines. And if the timelines have been adjusted and, you know, if there's no funding in the budget for some of these projects, then, you know, we're happy to have that conversation. But, you know, with all of the community engagement that's been involved, you know, I personally do not appreciate kind of the lack of response from DDOT. So just wanted to build on Chairman Bass's comments. So thank you for doing this, Zach. And I definitely support this letter.
Yeah, and again, thank you, Zach, for going through the capital budget, because I had not had a chance to get that far. On the TOPS modifications, it might not be a bad idea to point out how many safety assessments and other tracking that, you know, there's nothing to track those open tickets, and whether or not the update to TOPS might be an opportunity to get something together that could keep tabs of the requests that we're making that never seem to go anywhere.
yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to add, thank you, Zach, for catching the Kids Ride Free passes. I'm excited to hear that they're increasing that number. I'm wondering if it might not also be a good idea to CC Deputy Mayor Kine as well, since his office is part of that Kids Ride Free program. So just letting, and with this specific attention to the need for more distribution. And I'm happy to send that email to him.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He's also probably tired of hearing from me as well.
Excuse me, does the Kids Ride Free apply to the Summer Youth Jobs Program?
I'm glad you asked that. I know that they do get, at least the last time I asked about it, and Cynthia, maybe you have a more recent update, but 2 years ago, I did ask about transportation costs and was told that every student receives sort of, I think it's $100, or they receive a transportation voucher.
You mean every summer employee?
That's what I was told. Yeah, and you know, the reason I had brought it up, and I'm glad you did as well, was there was a young man who was working at the summer camp that Henrietta was in, all the way up by Kennel Gardens. And when you cost out the bus ride between the transfer and the metro, he ran out of his transportation allowance and ended up having to buy a bike.
Yeah.
Or bought a bike, and he was biking from Columbia Heights all the way to Kenilworth every morning and every afternoon.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, here we go.
No, that's a good thing to check on. But I would remind everyone too that the summer youth program is going entirely virtual this summer. So hopefully transportation issues won't impact them as much. At least this time. We'll have to keep an eye on it.
There's going to be whole new issues.
Next summer with next year's.
Oh, that's a good. I'm sorry. You're right. I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also what Cynthia just added to the chat box, pointing out the virtual summer jobs.
Can I just say I really love the chat feature of virtual meetings?
That's nice.
No, because the questions like that, we all get to see them, right? And I really appreciate that, because we're getting answers as we're asking questions and debating. I love that. It's a nice bonus. So if there are no other comments or questions, Commissioner Robarczyk, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I move to support this letter as testimony to the Committee on Transportation and the Environment for FY21.
Is there a second?
Second. I
Okay.
second.
Thank you, Commissioner Love Wade. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hands. And if we can't see you, just say so.
Hand raised.
Hand raised.
Okay, that looks like it's unanimous to me. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of this agenda for the special meeting. So with that, is there a motion to end the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you to
All
our
right, thank-
as well.
Thank you.
yeah, thank everyone for attending.
Thank
See
you.
everyone in a week.
See you next week.
Yes.
See everyone next Wednesday at
Your
7
agenda items.
regular meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.